have got to stop presenting a message of saying, you know, girls are out there being trafficked and young women, and yes, they are, but young men and boys are being trafficked too.
It's The Call with Nancy Sabato with guest Sean Wheeler and his story of surviving sex trafficking and ways to safeguard your child.
I was groomed very young, in, you know, before the age of 5. And then the active grooming started with me about 5 years old, and with older boys, probably high schoolers, who are, I suspect, part of that network as well. Well, I know they were. And then they introduced me into a circle of adults who were involved with both boys and girls in the community. And then from that point on, I was actively used when they could find me, and returned home. So I tell people, you know, trafficking happens in a variety of ways. It's not always like the child is taken away and disappears. That certainly does happen. Um, in many cases, the trafficker is known to the child. In my case, the person who was in charge of it, I knew actually was somebody my father knew from the business world, but my parents had no idea this was going on. Um, but what happened with me was, given the day and age, I would have breakfast in the morning, you know, and if when I wasn't in school, then go out and play, um, and come back at lunch, and then go out and play, and come back at dinner when the bell rang. And, you know, I tell people, think of like the old Andy Griffith show, where Opie would come in at noon. He's been playing all morning, and he was like 5 and 6, and then go out and play and just be home for dinner. And in those times where I was outside, that's where, if they because it was a small town, I had a pretty good idea where to find the kids that they used, would find me and pick me up in the car and take me off to a place, and hand me over, do it themselves, um, and then return me and tell me to be quiet about it. Um, and they keep children quiet out of fear. The first time I got gotten by the older boys, you know, I did have some fight in me. Even a 5-year-old can have some fight. Um, and so they just, I remember the older one telling the other two to, because they had me in a room of a house, I had no clothes on. He said, stretch him out. I want him to feel this. And so they grabbed my hands and my feet and pulled me tight, and he beat my backside with a section of race car track.
Oh.
And that sort of beat the fight out of me. And after that, I just complied, and I blamed myself. Um, and I'll tell you too, there's times when I'm sharing my story, I'm happy to do it because it's a gift from God, but it does make me tear up. So I may have to pause. But, you know, that's when I tell people, that's when I lost my voice. Now, some of those people that got me, and there were women involved too, they enjoyed hitting me. That just kind of was their thing. And so I got hit anyway, even if I cooperated. Um, about the age of 7, I was used in child sexual abuse material. They used to call it child pornography. I really don't care what you call it, but that's what I was used in, with 2 other kids and 3 adults. Um, and then things just continued until my mom ended up losing her teaching job, got another job in another state, and we finally moved away from that town. Um, and that was my world. And I tell people, you know, I remember the last time I got gotten, I was in a closet in my house crying, and I'd learned about prayer because I grew up in church, but I'd also been told by the predators and taught by them, you're too corrupt now for God to love. Um, you know, and when you're 5 and 6, you believe that. But I learned about prayer, and it's like all I could think of was, I was so tired of being hurt that way, was to say, Father, help me. And the tears stopped, and I think they even dried up. Um, and for years, I thought that was the end of it. I recognized that as a blessing. But I realized later, 2 weeks later, we moved away from that town. And they never got me again, you know. And that doesn't mean I hadn't been programmed already to be receptive, because I'd been taught this is normal for me. And so I tell people, by the time I was 9 or 10, I knew how to drink, knew how to smoke. I knew all about pornography, and I thought that was normal. And so if people hit on me later on, as even when we moved away, I just complied because I assumed that's what I had to do. So, then I eventually grew into an angry young adult and trusted nobody. And, um, many, many years later, I would meet the woman who became my wife. And my usual habit was if anybody got too close to me, I'd push them away. And she showed up at my house one day in tears and wanted to know why we were drifting apart. And I said, come in. I knew I had to tell her something. I said, look, people did things to me when I was little. I'm damaged goods. You can't possibly love me. Um, and she knew what that was. And she said, God doesn't see you as damaged goods, and neither do I. And I'm in love with you. And a year later, we got married. 16 years later, we're still married. She is my quiet prayer warrior wife. And she's the one that pushed me into counseling. And that's really what opened the doors for me she said, it needs to be a Christian counselor. And she was pretty insistent on it. And that whole process led me to a deliverance process. There were demonic things attached to me, but people ask me, when were you saved? And for me, it's really hard to say because at 14 I did the salvation prayer, but I know I was saved in that closet too when I was 9. And then working with the people that I worked with as counselors who were Christian counselors. So it's sort of like a threefold process for me, but it doesn't really matter because in 2011 I got baptized in the Holy Spirit and my world changed. So I wrote a book that came out in 2016, I think, September, and I now run Starfish Ministries in Colorado. I'm a consultant to several major organizations. And, early on, I told God, I just want my story heard. And he reminded me last year that at this point now, over 3 million people worldwide have heard my testimony. So we're making a difference.
You certainly are. This is hard for you. I'm sorry that it's hard for you.
Well, it's I'm worried about that too. And I talked to one of my friends, a good pastor named Chris Boyette in Lake Providence, Louisiana. I said, I still tear up. And he said, you just never got over being saved. Mm-hmm. He's right. I mean, the emotions that I express now, they're really tears of joy. I mean, how could I not be? I've spent 4 decades of my life believing I was a thing that God couldn't love. And man, when Jesus says the truth will set you free, it really did. But that's why it's a challenge, yes. But each time I speak, it gets easier, and so I'm grateful to God for that blessing.
I'm so sorry you went through that trauma. Breaks my heart, and I just met you. It's breaking my heart. You certainly did not deserve any of that. You did not. But on the flip side, God uses evil for good. And how are you helping to fight against child trafficking? And before, you also mentioned something about, chat rooms that parents should be aware of.
Yeah. What I do today, because really the globalized fight against child trafficking probably began in earnest 20, 25 years ago. And there was some data initially, but it's kind of outdated that a lot of organizations still use. But a group that I'm part of out of New York City, they're called ECPAT USA, ECPAT. And I think that stands for In Child Pornography and Trafficking, or Child Prostitution. I've seen both, but they're amazing people. And they did a report in 2013 called End Boys Too. And they used a number of sources to document, and they have significantly, I think they've proven that boys are actually half the victims in this country. A lot of people don't believe that. They think it only happens to girls, or they don't think it happens in the U.S. And the ECPAT report showed that in the United States, boys are more likely to be used in child sexual abuse material. So they're working on an update to that report, but that's what I provide people and say, look, you have got to stop presenting a message of saying, girls are out there being trafficked and young women, and yes, they are, but young men and boys are being trafficked too. And so I educate people. I tell them of the ones who I remember from the time I was a little kid, 3 out of the 10 were women. So when people want to tell me that women are never involved in this, it's only men, that's simply not true either. And often, I mean, look at Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. She would procure the girls and abuse them herself. And so she was certainly involved. At least that's my belief. She hasn't been convicted yet. But, there's many examples of both genders being involved in this. So that's what I try to do to educate people. And then a lot of what we need to do is teach people how you can monitor your kids online. Another really good organization is called Protect Young Eyes, and I think it's protectyoungeyes.org. They have good videos on there about how kids operate on the internet. You should take your child's cell phone away at night because it keeps them up at night. And, the chat rooms are one of the areas where kids meet predators, and they're always basically, you go on the internet, there's hundreds, I'm sure, of sex related chat rooms, supposedly for adults only, but 2 clicks and you're in. You just lie about your age. When a child gets in there, or a young person, and they will use a name that pretty much quickly identifies that they'll call themselves 18, but then they'll reveal, well, I'm really 12 or 13 or 10 or whatever. And the adults come out of the woodwork. And this can be men and women looking for boys and girls. It can be men looking for boys, women looking for girls. And they hit on these kids and they get them to send photographs, take, sexting basically, the nude photographs of themselves. And they use various applications to preserve those photographs, and then often those lead to blackmailing. And it can happen to a kid very young. They aren't equipped to know that it's not okay. Like when I was used that way at 7, I didn't like it because they were very cruel, but I just assumed this was normal. So those are a couple of organizations that really have good information. I think there's trying to remember an app, but it's an app that you can install on your kids' iPhones and tablets. Yeah, the name of the application is called Bark, just like a dog, BARK. And it is designed to monitor electronic devices, and you install it as the parent on your home computer, and you can install it on every child's cell phone, every tablet. And essentially what it does is it monitors the activity going on the computer or on the electronic device, and it will alert parents if sexually related messages are being traded, if a kid is talking about drugs, suicidal thoughts, things like that. And the people that develop Bark are pretty good at keeping up with the youth lingo of online surfing. So even when kids use acronyms, Bark knows what it is, and they alert the parents. And I've had a lot of people tell me, well, my kids are so smart, they just get around those things. They can't get around this, because the minute they try to disable the app or get around it, it alerts the parents. And it's a real simple, it's like the alarm goes off, and they, I think even if they touch the icon, then, it's like the parents get an alert. And so they can't take it off the device. And I think Bark has a free version, but I think their basic version is like 15 a month or something. But they basically monitor all sort of online activity, and they alert you to when your children are engaging in something or someone's trying to reach out to them to get them to send a sexually related picture, or even just a picture. Show me you in your swimsuit or something. It's like, what's that going to lead to? So Bark is really good. I believe there are several like that, and a good way to find it. Um, you can simply do an internet search for apps designed to monitor child online use, and it'll pull up Bark and probably some others. Um, Nothing's 100% foolproof, but it certainly gives parents a level of confidence in knowing that they're able to keep their kids safe.
I see this sign,
Mhm.
vetsforchildrescue.org. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, they're a group out of Arizona called Veterans for Child Rescue, and it's shortened on their website information. But if you go to their website, they'll have a really good film they produce called Contraland, and it's about an hour and 55 minutes long, and it details the extent of the operations they do, but also where people are looking for kids and how they come after them. Um, they work with law enforcement in a number of states, and they're trying to increase their influence. And I'm working with them to try and get a group established here in Colorado. They do set up sting operations, and they also educate people about the nature of trafficking and stuff like that. They're out of Arizona, where we moved to when we left that town in the Midwest. Um, and they'll tell you in the film, for example, there are 17 cartels operating out of Mexico that are bringing children north. And we know that they are also taking American children south. Um, Kids who are runaways or throwaways or whatever you want to call them are being taken south and sold south of the border. And so they they're founded by an amazing guy named Craig Sawyer, and he's a former Navy SEAL, a retired U.S. Marshal, um, and they do a lot of different things. But it's a good site to check into and to be supportive of. And I'm one of their volunteers, and I put their sign up wherever I am able to speak.
Hey, can you talk about some of the signs to look for if a child is going in that kind of a direction?
In terms of when I was a little kid, I finally was able to talk to my family about it, and I have 100% support from my family and friends for the work that I do now. But my aunt did tell me, she said, yeah, it was like you went from a sweet little boy to an angry, scared one overnight. Um, and that's a huge, huge red flag. Is why I tell people, if your child has a major shift in their personality, there's something going on. Um, and she told me, because there was a certain level of dysfunction going on in our home, that people just thought it was my parents arguing or whatever. They eventually got divorced, but my mom has passed away, but I have a great relationship with my father now. Um, but they just assumed it was related to all that. But you know, when a child has a personality change, that's a really good sign that something is going on. If their grades drop in school, or if they have issues fighting in school, I know when got into the first grade, I started getting into scraps, and I'm sure notes were sent home, that kind of thing, and that's not my normal personality. Um, if they're disappearing for periods of the day and you don't know where they're at. My wife tells me that when she raised my two stepsons, she said, I can't imagine letting a 5-year-old outside for 4 or 5 hours at a time alone and not knowing where he is. But again, that was kind of the day and age too. When I grew up, it was normal for kids to go outside and play. And so, but nowadays I think you make sure kind of keep tabs on your kids. If they are using online gaming, those online gaming platforms through PlayStation, they have chat rooms related to the games where the predators are networking. Um, and they will go after kids in there under the guise of being a friendly gamer. Um, my advice is just if kids under 18, you don't get to play online unless mom or dad is there with you. Um, because you don't need to as well. That kind of thing can be really good indicators. Yeah, I know that for off and on, I could be a very angry little boy. Um, and children aren't by nature that way, I don't think. Um, so changes in personalities are good things to look for is a big one, I would say. Oh, and I'm glad you asked because it just reminded me too. A really good thing to tell your children is to make sure they always know that it's safe to talk to you. Because I didn't have that sense of feeling at home. And if your kids are aware that I don't care what the topic is, if somebody's hurting you or something's bothering you, you can always talk to me. That opens the door for them to self-report. Somebody came up to me today and asked me to, do things that I thought were weird, and or whatever language a 5-year-old uses or a 10-year-old. Well, that can nip it in the bud pretty quick when kids are comfortable and safe talking to their parents.
And I pray for your ministry, and I hope that it flourishes, and let it just go all around the world and back. So thank you so much again, Sean.
Thank you for having me too. I tell people, I've had people ask me, what is my purpose? And I tell them, look, your purpose is to glorify God. And if you ask him, he'll tell you what it is, but be prepared for an answer you may not want. If you had told me 10 years ago this would be what I was doing, I would have laughed. And yet in this, I found my purpose. And so, we're all called to different things. There's an expression of us inside of each one of us that God put there that only we can do. And so, it's a blessing to connect with you, to connect with your ministry, with your listening audience, viewing audience. And I'm overwhelmingly blessed because, like you said, the Bible's very clear. God said, he told Joseph, I will take what was meant for your harm and turn it to good. And out of that dark, sad evil in which I grew up, I have now found a purpose that gets to glorify the Father.
If you want to read Sean's story, Wretch, Haunted by Shadows, Rescued by Jesus, go to Amazon.com. Are you looking for a devotional that will help you hear God's answers? Get Nancy's latest book, Pray Attention. It's available on Amazon.com. Want to see more stories and teachings? Go to thecallwithNancySabato.com. And may the Lord Jesus Christ richly bless you.